So thank you so much, Maria, for joining us today. We're looking forward to hearing your event. And please go ahead.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much, Wissam and Hayat, for inviting me to deliver a speech today about the topic called the new theory of personality, Weltanschauung therapy. So let me share my screen with you. Today, we will be talking about a new theory of personality, Weltanschauung therapy. The new theory of personality was born out of Weltanschauung therapy. I studied psychotherapy in England and graduated from Sheffield University. Now I'm based in Moscow and I'm a practicing psychoanalyst and psychotherapist. Why do we? Well, first of all, of course, it will be a very theoretical event, but I would like you to keep in mind right now already and ask yourself such questions. For example, what makes us humans? What are the capacities or qualities or traits that actually makes us human? I would like you to also think and maybe write in the chat, what senses do you know? By senses, I don't mean feelings, because of course we have sensory capacities such as, viewing, smelling, touching, feeling. All of these things are, for me, in English, they're sensory capacities. When I ask you about senses, I mean, how many senses do we have as humans? If senses make us humans, the ability to sense things make us human, I would like you to write in the chat. So I'll give you an example. For example, a sense of reality. It's a real good sense, right? Can you actually, give me your understanding of what senses exist? Today, it will be a very theoretical presentation because it's quite a revolutionary topic, and of course, we won't have a lot of time to cover the practical aspects. But why I'm interested in delivering this presentation today? Well, because Wissam and Hayat are doing a great job tackling interesting subjects around self-development. And I wanted to participate and share my knowledge and my understanding of certain things in this topic. So why do we need a new theory of personality? Well, clearly, we don't really need any theories per se, but I believe that we need a theory of personality because something is going completely berserk. Something is going wrong in our world. We're doing something wrong because we are constantly having wars. We don't understand each other. We have global ecological catastrophes. We have an inability to cooperate and reach consensus on global issues, such as climate change. We have a lot of people, and to be honest with you, we're nearly 9 billion or something around that number, and we don't have enough resources for everyone. Not enough water, not enough food, not enough resources. And of course, the technological progress is not advanced, exactly, harmonious, and not, we're using dirty energy, dirty industries to create clean energy. And we can go on and on about it. So Club of Rome, it's an organization that you might be familiar with. It consists of 30 of some members, and they issued a report back in 2018 stating that it's basically saying that we are not too many anymore. Before they used to say that we're just too many and we need to keep we need to reduce the population of the earth just because we don't have enough resources. Of course, they weren't saying it overtly, but we could sense from the globalist agenda that, and of course, all these conspiracy theories that we're just too many and the world cannot cope. Now, what they're saying in 2018, that, okay, we're a lot of people on this planet. What we can do is we can try and change the psychology of the worldview, which means we can try and change the way people view themselves and view the world around them. In German, it's Weltanschauung. So me being a psychotherapist, a psychoanalyst, it caught my eye, it caught my attention, you know, because if the world elite, the most prominent leaders are starting to say that we need to pay attention to the psychology of the worldview, we need to change the way people think of themselves and see the world. Well, that's becoming interesting, right? That's quite interesting. So we have reached a dead end. So we need to step away from primitive materialist, functionalism, and physicalism, which argue that all mental phenomena, including causation, mental causation, free will, self-identity, and creativity, depend on physical phenomena in the brain, and which states that the person is ruled by emotions, the desire for power, high social status, wealth, and consumption. Well, if we do step away from materialism, that means that we recognize what Stephen Hawking was speaking about. He, before he died, you are all familiar with Stephen Hawking. He said, well, the laws of nature can be understood only with the help of divine reason. So that means that we need to study not only material, solid, something that we can sense and like feel with our hands and study, but we need to study higher spiritual needs of a person. Having said that, this means that our search for wisdom is in overcoming contradictions. And this means that we need to investigate not only the contradictions of a physical, economic, and social nature, but contradictions of natural and eternal phenomena, hidden from direct perception, such as riddles and contradictions of human soul. And of course, as you know from the history and a lot of philosophers, people wanted always to know the causes of certain things and elements and things that do really exist. They wanted to study the nature of things, the origin of existence, and the meaning that really stays there, despite, you know, regardless of the will and desires of man. So we can say that we can study the soul. Of course, the soul, maybe it's not proven scientifically yet, but we are approaching the era and the epoch when we can actually prove that the soul exists. It can be also argued that, well, what do we know about, you know, black holes, about the origin of information, you know, and other things, you know, it can also be argued. But we do live in a world, in a time of, for example, where information is relevant, is very dominant. You know, we're not living in a materialistic world anymore. So why do we need to use ancient principles? We need to think of new theories of how we can study reality around us, and this reality, it can be, you know, called soul. And of course, soul in German, well, we have terminology here, yeah. So we have, for example, in Greek, soul means psyche, which is psyche in Greek, and it means to breathe life, a breath. So in Russia, it's also dusha, which is also related to breath. Well, the first psychoanalyst, you would think that the first psychoanalyst was Freud, but of course, the first psychoanalyst in history was Plato. For example, he said such things as soul is dual and includes intelligent and unreasonable parts. He also said the principles are pairs of opposites. So psychoanalysis is the science of soul. So, but not only psychoanalysis, of course, studies the man as such, human, and we have qualities and characteristics of the soul, and that's really what psycho means. But of course, you know, we use also the terms such as intellect, cognitive abilities, emotions, attitudes, consciousness, thinking, personality, brain, neurophysiology, and even quantum mechanics nowadays when we talk about the science of a man. So what is the definition of the soul? Let me just briefly read it to you, and then there will be more definitions just so that we can be on the same page. So the soul is the most important thing in a person, is his essence, what gives life to both body and mind, endows them with the instincts, talents, and abilities, gives people the opportunity to rejoice, grieve, understand, and love each other. Instead of this notion, Freud used mysterious term divine entities. That remained in the classical psychoanalysis, instead of a more appropriate term that we use, which is soul, anima, psyche, and also mens in Latin. What is psychology? Psychology is the science of mental realities, of a living person's innate or acquired abilities and needs. That is the science of reasons, causalities, behind the people's similarities and differences. The mentality. What is the mentality? Mentality, or also in English, mind, is the means of existence of the soul. From the birth of a living being to its blossoming, then diseases, then slow decay and self-destruction. So that's the process, of course, culminating in death. So without this term and this word, we will not be able to analyze each specific personality. So personality is a good question. Of course, guys, what do you know about personality types? Of course, all of you are very familiar with a lot of interesting theories. So you can write in the chat if you want. Different personalities, different theories, different approaches to understanding what personality means. For the sake of today's discussion, we would like to focus on my approach, which is Weltanschauung therapy, which literally means worldview therapy. Weltanschauung therapy. In this paradigm, we have, when we deal with a person, with a client, we do not have this, we don't follow this strict medical model where there is a patient and a therapist, and then we talk about sickness and psychological sickness or, mental disease. We are talking about different manifestations of the soul. And we help the person to understand what he or she are made of and what the world around them is made of. So we study the manifestations of the soul if we want to briefly describe the approach, Weltanschauung therapy. So for this, we have Russian scientists, two scientists, Alexander Zayat and Dr. Polisev. They spent 30 years in Russia trying to classify all these manifestations of the soul. And they also basically, and we will see it absolutely later, or we will see it right now. But what I want you to do also is to try to put the psychoanalyst's glasses on. Try to think as a psychoanalyst right now together with me, because it's a science in the making, and all of us can and should contribute to the science and its application in the real world. So try to be me for the sake of this presentation. What is psychoanalysis? Psychoanalysis is, in a broad sense, the science of with the difficulties and contradictions in human relations, and about the complexities of fine-tuning the soul itself. So if you see where we can actually try to fix the world, well, of course, in ideal world, if we're all psychoanalysts and we all know a little bit more about human nature, then of course we are able to understand each other better and find new ways of cooperating and relating to each other. So for this presentation, we will focus on basic principles of the new personality theory called tendentialism, and how we can apply them in general life. We will answer the question why there are only 8 universal ontological tendencies. We will review the methods for detecting tendencies, psychodiagnostics. We will also talk about new opportunities for the application of this innovative theory in psychotherapy, Weltanschauung therapy. And Let's get to the core of this new theory. So really, this new theory, tendentialism, offers a new understanding of personality. And of course, in Russia, and you know, Russian soul is very popular in Hollywood movies and in Russian classical literature, Russian soul, but I'm talking about just human soul in general. So we, for us, for the Russians, its personality is linked to the soul, as I previously mentioned. For you, it could be divine entities, like Freud said, or for you, and your understanding of the soul may be different, but we will see now why it is different from the West. So Freud considered that he is the father of psychoanalysis, of course. He introduced the terms id or id, unconscious, into everyday life. He borrowed, not many of you may know, but he borrowed this concept from Georg Brodek. He was actually his doctor. He cured Freud from his own mental disturbances, and he was his private his doctor as well. So Brodek coined this term id, and it literally means everything that makes us move, think, and self-organize. Also, other terms that you may be familiar with that Freud introduced are superego, Oedipus complex, libido, and other interesting terms that are still used by traditional psychoanalysts in the West to treat patients. So Freud believed that the basis of the psyche is divine entities, göttliche Wesen, heavenly forces in English, which are mentioned in history starting from Pythagoras and Chaldean numerology. So Freud did not use the term soul. We will not dwell on the classics. You can read in detail about this already outdated theory in Wikipedia, and you can also read the original works of Freud himself in German or English or any other language. Until now, unfortunately or fortunately, Freud's theory is not officially recognized in the scientific world, due to the fact that it has no evidence-based research findings. Each classical psychoanalyst, in his or her experience of analysis, according to Freud, cannot systematically share and even apply all the general laws of theory discovered by Freud. So all of us, and I hope you join me in this thinking, that we are tired of thinking that we are sexually preoccupied animals afraid of death. And all our actions and thoughts are openly only about one thing: power, money, and sex. After all, Freud was never able to quantify and describe all the laws of the psyche, and couldn't or didn't want to clearly explain the structure of person's personality, what parts it's made of. So, of course, in Russia, we like these kind of challenges, and we have created our own theory of personality around 30 years ago, and basically this theory offers a clear understanding of what we need in order to acquire the inner harmony and balance in relationships with other people and the world around us. This new theory is born out of the new therapeutic approach called Weltanschauung therapy, and the authors are Russian scientist Dr. Kolesev and his assistant and student Alexander Zayats, who called this approach, which is with a quite difficult, challenging name to pronounce, tendentialism. Briefly, just to go over again the official definition of Weltanschauung therapy. It's a new approach in psychotherapy. It's a combination of the contemporary existential, in a way even sci-fi psychoanalysis, an openly religious approach in understanding the human being and his soul. So interesting, right? I know that we don't like to talk about religion, especially in this group, so we can leave this word out of the question, and we don't have to really pay too much attention to this word. The literal translation from German stands as theory of worldview, meaning a systemic solution to the problems of implementing a person's individual life project in combination with an understanding of his true purpose, his mental characteristics, the uniqueness of his fate, position in society, and his temporality, existential time of being. Instead of individual universal aspirations of the individual, such as will to power, Adler, will to pleasure, Freud, will to value, meaning Frankl, the theory of ontological tendencies, tendentialism, is taken as a basis in VT, which encompasses all clear and understandable mental, souls, needs, and abilities that make the human will to exist. I hope I don't lose you here with all this terminology, but of course, as you can see here, what we're trying to say that various approaches were based on various theses. And so, for instance, for you, if you're familiar with the thesis of Freud, it's will to pleasure. So we are all, our psychosexual development and our being is inclined to always think about immediate satisfaction of our instincts and will to pleasure. And so other approaches, such as approach of Viktor Frankl, his approach is based on the will to value, describing people always seeking value and meaning in their life, and that's how they build and construct their reality. So this is just to give you an overview of how our approach differs from other people's approaches. So definition of a tendency. So the tendency is an ontological, it's an ontological tendency. It determines the conscious and unconscious ways of existence. It is able to help us understand communication styles, principles of behavior, type of thinking, ways of reacting, types of irrational motives. So what is ontology? Ontology is a science of being. So ontology is for example, it's a philosophical term. Okay, it means that a tendency is a force that makes the essential entities. It helps to distinguish the essential entities in your soul from potential ones. For example, you have a potential love, and then it becomes essential love. So here is also a little bit of etymology for you. Tendentialism from Latin flecte, German tendens, and Russian tendenция, direction of development, inclination, striving. Alexander Zayats, Russian psychoanalyst, philosopher, and writer, author of the monograph Notes of a Psychoanalyst, Men's Cynic. So to be more precise, we have a limited number of tendencies, and these tendencies are a compass for our personality types. So we are able to study these tendencies and identify our character and traits of our character, qualities of our qualities and instincts and drives and everything inside. So these scientists, they classified all the instincts, drives, feelings, affects, depending on the tendencies that unite them. And so, as I say, there's 8 general ontological tendencies that our soul is made of, 64 basic concepts to denote all human needs and abilities, and all the names of these tendencies were taken from the psychoanalytical theory of neurosis. Depressive, obsessive, phobic, hysterical, manic, constructive. And these are very it's jargon-based words that I don't want to go into details into each tendency, what each tendency is responsible for. Just I want you to compare it, for example, with Freud and psychosexual development. For Freud, there was only, for example, 5 stages, and they were attached to the actual age of the child. So they were processes of psychosexual development that were limited in time. And for our psychoanalysts here in Russia, we are not limited by time. Yeah, we are all these tendencies, they always exist in you. Our job is to detect detect them and understand them. So, for example, I mean, I'm sure that you try to write down all the senses that I asked you in the beginning. And let me see what you've written. Isabel and Soledad, great. You see, fantastic. A lot of interesting questions, answers here. So, well, these two scientists, they were able to actually make a list of all the senses, all the instincts, all the drives, all the affects that we have inside our tendencies. And so, just to give you an example, here they are, all the senses that we have. A sense of proportion, a sense of reality, a sense of joy, a sense of decency, feeling of freedom and fearlessness. Sorry, it's not feeling, it's also a sense of community of all living things, the sense of love and friendship, a sense of creation. It's a little bit, yeah. So now we're talking about psychodiagnostics. So how can we detect all these interesting tendencies in us, and how can we actually use them to understand and regulate these tendencies inside us? So of course there are tests that we can use, tests that help you to identify this, and also during the process of psychotherapy session. Yes, and I feel like maybe we can go right to the end. I don't want to bore you because it's a lot of theory here, and I really want to talk to you and ask your opinion, and talk to you and ask your experience of psychoanalysis, and why do you think it's important, and do you think that is valid for you, what I'm saying? Are you interested in knowing more about the theory of tendentialism, and do you think it's even possible to have, do you agree with what I'm saying? Is it possible to have a finite system and classification of everything that I mentioned? It will be great to hear your opinion. So we can now just end our theoretical part on this final note. And we can talk about ACG factor, the fact that we are, that we spoke in the beginning, we cannot live in the world that we're living right now, in a selfish and aggressive world. We need to take into account the ecology of the soul. Instead of unrestrained consumption of the accumulation of material values, people should have a new spiritual need, a society of spiritually gifted and free individuals responsible for the future of the planet. And we need to have new leaders competent in the field of soul analysis, honest and incorruptible governments, and international organizations. Thank you very much. And I open this meeting to the session of questions and answers.